welcome to our short review class of Rabbi Ginsburg's live broadcast from November 2016. Before we start, I just want to remind you that we're moving to a new schedule with the broadcast. They're going to be on the first Sunday of every civil month, which means that the next live broadcast from Jerusalem will be on December 4th, 2016. If you would like to watch, now is a good time to go to our sign-up page. That's at livebroadcast.inner.org, and you can put your email in and you'll get a reminder a few hours before the broadcast so that you can tune in and watch. I'd also like to remind you that there is always an opportunity to ask questions at the end of each broadcast. The Rav gives about half an hour to 45 minutes, and it's a great opportunity to ask both questions that relate to the broadcast itself, and people find a way to put personal things into those questions as well. Okay, so this month's broadcast for November was very interesting. It basically felt like the Rav was talking mostly about this month being a month of transformation. The main reason for that apparently is because the name of the month begins with the word Mar. Mar Cheshvan is the name of the month, the full name. And even though it's not the etymological meaning apparently, but the word Mar also means bitterness. And bitterness is always something that needs to be transformed into sweetness. So the way that the Rav started this was with the Parsha of the week when the broadcast was, which was Noach. And there the waters that were a flood were also transformed into sweetening waters, because the understanding is that the Mabul, the flood that basically consumed the world, also cleansed it, also made it into a habitable place again for souls and for divine rectification. So as much as the waters themselves were very bitter, the result was that the bitter waters turned into something positive, into sweetness. Along this theme of Parshat Noach and transforming the bitter into sweet, the Rav mentioned what he considers to be one of the major teachings, the main and most important teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says that when Noach was commanded to make a tzohar for the ark, the meaning of this word tzohar is not so simple. Rashi gives two different explanations. He says it could be that tzohar is a window to let light in, and it could be that tzohar is a precious stone, maybe amber or something else, that gives off light. The idea being that they were in the ark for a long time without the ability to see anything because it was shut off, it was closed, so therefore they had to have some kind of light source. The Baal Shem Tov takes this idea of tzohar ta'aseh l'teva, God commanded Noach to make a tzohar for the ark, and he explains from that the word tzohar as light, whether it be light from a window or light from a precious stone, should be understood as illuminating your words. How does he get to that? Because the word teva, ark, in Hebrew also means word. So if you make a tzohar for your words, that means that you illuminate your words. How do you illuminate your words? Well, just by the fact of thinking that my words should shine, my words should be something a little bit more than just what I say. They have to come from the heart. And I can imagine that my words are like light coming out of my mouth. There is even a verse that says, "Ptach picha veya'iru dvarecha," that you should open your mouth and your words should shine out, not be spoken out, but should shine out. The moment that you have somebody else's good intentions in mind, but the moment that you think well of somebody else, then your words are illuminated. You can do this whether you're talking to somebody else. You can also do this when you're praying. It's just imagine, at the higher levels, you can really imagine this, that the letters that are coming out of your mouth are actually chiseled out of light. They're like made out of light. And the moment that you even think this, the moment that you even see things this way, that the words that I'm speaking is not just sound, it's also light, apart from all the mystical intentions that have to do with that, and the Rav didn't speak about those too much, But the moment that you even just think of that, it elevates the words that you're saying to a whole new level. And most importantly, as he explained, this ties in with another teaching from the Baal Shem Tov, that the word tzohar can be transformed itself. The word itself can be used, not even without even putting light on it, all the more so if you add light. The word itself can be used as a mechanism for changing the bitter into sweet. It says about Baal Shem Tov, how do you do that? Well, if you look at the letters of Tzohar, Tzadik Hey Reish, you can see that if you permute them, you can form the word Tzara, Tzadik Reish Hey. Tzara means a hardship. So if you take the Tzara and in your mind you transpose the letters, you permute them, and you create a Tzohar out of it, and all the more so if you add light to this Tzohar, you add light to this word that you've created from the word hardship, then everything is changed. The bitter becomes sweet. Just by doing this in your head. There's a famous transformation that the Baal Shem Tov is known to have done. In his time, the righteous individuals, the tzaddikim, were reclusive. And they would take themselves and become hermits in forests and in desolate places. The reason for that was that they wanted to serve God, they wanted to learn and to pray without anybody bothering them, because they did have a lot of spiritual abilities. And they knew that if they came in contact with people, they would bother them, they wouldn't be able to focus on their spiritual work. But when the Baal Shem Tov came along, became the head of the tzaddikim, the head of these individuals, these righteous masters of Torah, he taught that he taught them that they need to make the Ya'ar into an Ir, to turn the forest, which is the word Ya'ar, Yud Ain Reish, into a city, which is a different permutation of the same letters, Ain Yud Reish. So from Yud Ain Reish, it became Ain Yud Reish. By doing that, he taught them that even though they put their divine service first, really they should use their abilities to serve other Jews, and they do that by going into the cities where most of the Jews dwelt. So this is considered to be one of the most important teachings from the Baal Shem Tov, this ability to take words, to both illuminate them and to transpose them, to permute their letters, creating something sweet out of something that was bitter before. Because of this word bitter, the Rav came to the name Miriam. Miriam was Moshe Rabbeinu's sister, older sister. She was 7 years older. And amazingly, she had many names, not just Miriam. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu had 7 or 8. She had either 10 or 11. How do we know this? That's how the sages learn the strange names found in the book of Chronicles. If you remember from past broadcasts, the Rav mentioned that the book of Chronicles is very cryptic because we find it's supposed to be a genealogy, and so we expect to find names that we've heard of, and yet there's many, many names that we've never seen anywhere else in the Bible. So the sages explained that whenever you find these names that are unknown in the book of Chronicles, they're meant to be understood homiletically. They're meant to be interpreted in a certain way, and not that they speak literally of some or other person. So when they come to chapter 4 especially, we find that the sages are very perplexed by many of the names there, and they end up saying in the Talmud that these names are all names for Miriam. And between the different opinions, there's either 10 or 11 names. Each one of these names, when you look at it, you see an incredible relationship to what we just talked about from the Baal Shem Tov, that the bitter becomes sweet. Miriam's name itself, the name that we know from the Pentateuch, from the Torah, means bitterness, Miriam. And you can even say maybe it's like bitter waters, like a combination of Mar and Yam, or Mara and Maim. So she's the bitter waters, specifically alluding to the difficulty of the enslavement in Egypt. When she was born, the hardships of the enslavement started. And she was 86 when they came out of Egypt. Those were the hardest 86 years from her birth to the Exodus, which was when she was 86. And her father, Moshe Rabbeinu's parents, named her Miriam because of that bitterness. They saw that bitterness coming, and they named her after it. But Miriam wasn't just an allusion. Her name is not just an allusion to what was happening with people. It was something that was very personal and individual for her also. It says that she was born very, very sick. And not only sick, she was sterile. She was unable to give birth. She ended up marrying Kalev, the spy, one of the 12 spies that Moshe Rabbeinu sent to the land of Israel to see it. And he was the only one, together with Joshua, that was left from these 12 spies. And he married Miriam. And through his care for her, for his love for her, and his willingness even to marry this woman who was very sickly and unbecoming and so on, she was transformed. And so all of the names that show up in Chronicles, this is the way the sages interpret them, are names that represent the sweetening that Miriam went through when she was married, and eventually she had many children. This whole transformation is specifically related to Miriam. Once the Rav got into the topic of Miriam, so he brought this beautiful thing about Miriam being one of the three mothers of kingdom. Now, the mothers of kingdom is something that he's been talking about for the last few months. He was talking specifically about Ruth, and he also mentioned Tamar once, and now we added Miriam. Why do we say that she's the mother of kingdom? Because having married Kalev, the whole house of Yishai, who descended from her, came from Miriam. So even though she herself was a Levite, like Moshe Rabbeinu, by marrying Kalev, who was from the tribe of Judah, she ended up being the mother of the whole house of David. Just like Tamar, who married Judah, and from whom Peretz came, and from whom the house of David came, and Ruth, who was the convert from the Moabite kingdom, who joined the Jewish people and married Boaz, and out of whom came Oved, who was King David's grandfather. So we have these three great women, Tamar, Miriam, and Ruth, who together are the mothers of kingdom, meaning from them came the house of David. And there was a beautiful thing that came out here, that when you write their three names out, Tamar, Miriam, Ruth, you see that the initials spell Tamar, the first one of these women, and the last letters of the three names also spell Tamar. The difference, though, is that the initials go forward, Taf Mem Resh, Tamar, Miriam, Ruth, but with the final letters, it goes in reverse. It's in the opposite order. You'll find that the Taf is the first one from Ruth. The last letter of Ruth is Taf. And the last letter of Miriam is Mem. And the last letter of Tamar is Resh. So you get Tamar backwards. Now, so you have front and reverse, forwards and reverse, Tamar. Tamar means literally the end of bitterness. That's really what it means. So again, we have this allusion to the bitterness ending in the month of Cheshvan, in this month. But the Rav added another thing to it. Tamar literally means date palm. And what is special about the date palm is that its trees are not, don't have both sexes. They're not both male and female, so they don't self-pollinate. They're male trees and female trees. The pollination has to happen in such a way that the female tree be pollinated, then the fruit is good. The male trees also have something, but it's not like real fruit. The real fruit comes from the female trees. So what we have here again is this idea of there being a transference, a movement that creates male and female together giving off the good fruit. Just like in the date palm, that's also how this transformation from bitterness to sweetness happens. This needs a little bit of clarification. We'll do that in a moment. But again, the idea of there being a male and female tree is instrumental in the movement from bitterness to sweetness. How does that work? The idea that the Rav brought about was the relationship between man and a woman. And that negative situations are resolved through the bond between husband and wife. That the loyalty between the husband and the wife, the love between them, has the power to transform reality. Just like we just mentioned about Kalev and Miriam. Kalev was tremendously loyal to his wife. He married a woman who supposedly would not have been able to have children. He married a woman who was very unbecoming. And through his love of her, she transformed her bitterness into something sweet. She transformed her natural tendency to be what she was, full of bitterness. Again, not herself, but her situation was very bitter and very harsh. And through his loyalty and his love of his wife, he was able to transform it into something sweet, into something good that then bore fruit, that then allowed Miriam to have many children, and eventually not just to have children, but to be the mother of kingdom, the mother of the house of David. In this respect, he mentioned the idea of bitterness in the Torah, which transforms into sweetness. And again, it's related to the same word, mara. When the Jewish people came out of the Red Sea, the first stop they had was in a place called Mara, where there was no water. The waters there were bitter, so the place was called Mara. So God told Moshe to throw in a branch. The branch was, according to the sages, it was an olive branch. The olive branch itself is bitter. This is called healing like with like, that he added bitterness into the bitter waters, and they sweetened. Why is this story so important? Because we mentioned the main teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Maybe the most important teaching that the Baal Shem Tov taught was of submission, separation, and sweetening, of how to transform the bitter into sweet, which requires 3 stages. And the only place in the entire Torah, the 5 books of Moses, where the root sweetness appears is in this story, where Moshe threw the branch into the bitter waters and they were sweetened. So this is the example of the bitter turning into sweetness in the Torah. And again, it begins with the bitter mara and ends with the sweetness. The final part of the broadcast was the Rav relating a story that appears in the Talmud, albeit in very short, but the story that describes the loyalty, or the necessary loyalty, and what it can transform in a couple's life. The story was a story called the Weasel and the Well, and we're not going to go over it right now. I'll just say the end of the conclusion from this story is that by the husband being loyal to his wife, he's able to transform even the deepest illness, the most difficult times, into something that will turn into sweetness. So that's it for our short review. You can also download a transcript with notes from our website, inner.org. And I'll just remind you again, on December 4th, join us for the next broadcast, and we'd like to see you then.